The display flickered with thousands of star systems, each one marked with careful notation. Trade routes glowed in soft blue lines, connecting worlds across impossible distances. Warning zones appeared in yellow where stellar phenomena made navigation dangerous. Restricted areas showed in orange where territorial disputes remained unsettled. And then there was the red zone. Zilthara stared at it with her three eyes, each one focusing independently on different aspects of the massive border that carved through an entire spiral arm of the galaxy. The red zone was huge, encompassing thousands of systems, and it had been there on every map she had studied since her first day at the Cartography Institute. Every map, every database, every archive going back 300 cycles. She reached out with her tentacle and traced the border on the holographic display. "Why is human space marked like this?" she asked. Her mentor, Velkos, looked up from his own workstation. His scales rippled with what Zilthara had learned to recognize as amusement. "You have been updating stellar charts for 2 cycles now, and you only just now ask this question?" "I thought it was obvious," Zilthara admitted. "A dangerous region, perhaps unusual radiation or gravitational anomalies. But I have been reviewing the data, and human space shows no such phenomena. The stars are normal. The worlds are normal. Yet every official map from every government shows this warning." Velkos set down his instruments and moved to stand beside her. He was old. His scales faded to a pale gray that spoke of many years spent in the sterile environment of archives and observation posts. "What do you know of humans?" he asked. Zilthara thought for a moment. "They are a member species of the Galactic Council. They have been part of the community for 300 cycles. They rarely attend council sessions. They maintain minimal trade relations. They keep to themselves." "All true," Velkos said. "But you have not answered my question. What do you know of humans themselves?" Zilthara hesitated. "I know nothing. I have never met one. I have never seen records of their appearance or culture. It is as if they exist in name only." "Exactly." Velkos gestured at the red zone. "The warning exists because of a treaty, the oldest treaty in current galactic law. Every species that joins the Council must agree to its terms before they are granted full membership." "A treaty about a warning zone?" Zilthara felt confused. What threat could one species pose that requires such measures? Velkos was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to his personal archive and retrieved a data crystal. It was old, the kind that required ancient readers that most facilities had long since discarded. "What I'm about to show you is not classified, but it is not widely distributed either. Most species prefer not to remember." He inserted the crystal into a compatible reader, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed a different map, one from 300 cycles ago. Human space was tiny then, just a single system marked in green. Around it, marked in the proud purple of a major power, was the territory of the Thalaxian Empire. The Thalaxians were a powerful species, Velkos explained. They had been part of the galactic community for 1,000 cycles. They had conquered or absorbed dozens of other species. Their military was vast and their technology was advanced. When they detected the first radio signals from the human homeworld, they sent a fleet to investigate. The display shifted, showing archived footage that made Zilthara's breathing tubes constrict with tension. A massive Thalaxian war fleet. Hundreds of ships, each one bristling with weapons that could shatter continents. They hung in space above a blue and green world that had to be Earth. "First contact," Velkos said softly. The Thalaxians transmitted a message demanding immediate surrender. They expected compliance. Every species they had ever encountered had either surrendered or been destroyed. Humans were primitive by galactic standards. They had barely achieved faster-than-light capability. They had no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no quantum missiles. "What happened?" Zilthara asked, though part of her did not want to know. The humans sent a response. A simple message. They said they would not surrender, but they would negotiate. The Thalaxian fleet commander interpreted this as defiance. He ordered a demonstration of power. One of his battleships opened fire on a human space station. The footage showed a bright flash as the station exploded. Zilthara felt sick. Hundreds or thousands of lives ended in an instant to prove a point. The human response was immediate, Velkos continued. The display showed new signals appearing on the tactical screen. The Thalaxians detected launch signatures from the planet's surface and from various positions throughout the system. They assumed these were primitive kinetic weapons or perhaps nuclear missiles. They laughed. Their shields could stop such attacks easily. But something in Velkos's tone made Zilthara understand that whatever came next was not something the Thalaxians had laughed about for long. The footage showed the missiles arriving at the fleet. They did not explode against the shields as expected. Instead, they passed through the shields as if they were not there at all. Each missile struck a Thalaxian ship with perfect precision. And then the fleet began to die. Ships exploded from within. Others simply went dark, all power ceasing in an instant. Some tore themselves apart as their own weapons detonated inside their hulls. In less than 6 minutes, the entire Thalaxian fleet was gone. 473 warships destroyed or disabled. Over 200,000 Thalaxian military personnel, dead or dying in the cold of space. How? Zilthara whispered. How could a primitive species do this? That question haunted the Galactic Council for years, Velkos said. The surviving Thalaxians could not explain it. Their shields had failed. Their weapons had been turned against them. Their computers had been compromised. It was as if the humans had known every detail of their technology and had prepared specific counters for every system. He pulled up another document, this one a formal report from the Council investigation. When diplomats finally made peaceful contact with Earth, the humans explained. They had been monitoring galactic transmissions for decades before the Thalaxians arrived. They had observed and analyzed every species they could detect. They had studied galactic technology and found it surprisingly uniform. Every species used similar principles for shields, weapons, and propulsion. And humans? Zilthara asked. Humans had taken a different path. Their isolation had forced them to develop unique solutions to technological problems. Their artificial intelligence was more advanced. Their computer systems used different architecture. Their weapons operated on principles that galactic shields were not designed to stop. Velkos paused. But more than that, humans had spent their entire history fighting themselves. They understood war in ways that species who conquered primitive neighbors never had to learn. The display shifted again, showing footage from Earth's surface. Zilthara saw images of destruction on a scale that made her breathing tubes clench. Cities in ruins, weapons that could end all life on a planet, conflicts that killed millions. Humans nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, Velkos explained. They developed weapons capable of rendering their own world uninhabitable. They fought wars that killed more of their own kind than most galactic conflicts killed in centuries, and somehow they survived. They learned. They united their world under a single government and swore to never let such destruction happen again. So the Thalaxians attacked a species that had survived its own apocalypse, Zilthara said slowly. A species that had learned to wage war against enemies using their own technology. Exactly. Velkos pulled up the treaty document. After the destruction of the Thalaxian fleet, the Council faced a choice. Declare war on humanity or negotiate peace. They chose negotiation. The humans had one simple demand: leave them alone. They wanted no part of galactic politics, no involvement in trade disputes or territorial conflicts. They would maintain minimal diplomatic contact and would share basic technology to prove they were not a threat to peaceful species. In exchange, all galactic powers would agree to mark human space as restricted territory. And everyone agreed? Zilthara asked. The Thalaxian Empire just accepted the destruction of their fleet? The Thalaxian Empire no longer exists, Velkos said quietly. After the fleet was destroyed, their government collapsed. Their subject species rebelled. Within 10 cycles, the entire empire had fragmented into dozens of smaller states. That is what happens when an empire built on military might loses its military in a single engagement. Zilthara looked at the red zone on the map with new understanding. So the warning is real. Humans are dangerous. Humans are terrifying, Velkos corrected. Not because of what they did, but because of what they chose not to do. After destroying the Thalaxian fleet, they could have pressed their advantage. They could have seized territory, demanded tribute, established themselves as the dominant power in the galaxy. Instead, they asked to be left alone. They wanted peace. He gestured at the red zone. That border represents the most frightening thing in the galaxy. A species with the power to conquer, choosing restraint. A civilization that survived its own worst impulses and decided that isolation was preferable to empire. Every species that joins the Council has shown this history. Every captain is taught to respect that border. Every government knows that the map stops at human space for a very good reason. Zilthara absorbed this information, her mind's working through the implications. Has anyone ever violated the border since the treaty? Small incidents, Velkos admitted. Pirates, smugglers, lost ships that strayed too close. In every case, humans responded with warnings first. They always give chances. They escort violators back to the border and send formal complaints through diplomatic channels. They follow every rule and every protocol. He paused. But there are stories, rumors of what happens to those who ignore the warnings. What stories? Zilthara asked. Nothing confirmed. Nothing documented. But captains talk. They say that ships that push too far into human space simply disappear. Not destroyed, not captured. Just gone as if they never existed. And later, sometimes much later, those ships reappear at the border. Empty, intact. All systems functioning. But no crew. Just a message on the computer. Next time, listen to the warning. Zilthara felt a chill run through her body. That sounds like a myth designed to scare young navigators. Perhaps, Velkos agreed. But myths often contain truth. And whether the stories are accurate or not, they serve a purpose. They remind everyone why the map shows that red zone. They remind us that the treaty exists for our protection as much as theirs. He closed the archive and the display returned to the standard galactic map. The red zone sat there bold and unmistakable. You asked why human space is marked this way. Now you know. It is not a warning about natural hazards. It is a warning about a species that learned to master war and chose peace instead. A species that asks only to be left alone, and has demonstrated both the ability and willingness to enforce that request. Zilthara nodded slowly. She would mark the maps as regulations required. She would include the warning zones and the restricted territories, and she would never again wonder why such a large section of the galaxy was colored red. But even as she returned to her work, she could not help but think about the younger species out there. The aggressive empires that were constantly testing boundaries and seeking new territories to claim. Did they know this history? Did they understand what that red zone really meant? She hoped they did. Because if they did not, they would learn the same lesson the Thalaxians had learned 300 cycles ago, and that was a lesson no species should have to learn the hard way. In the distance, far beyond the edges of mapped space, new signals were being detected. A species calling themselves the Krin Dominion had just achieved faster-than-light travel. They were expanding rapidly, claiming system after system. Their military was powerful and their ambitions were vast. Zilthara added them to the watch list and returned to her charts. She did not know it yet, but the galaxy was about to be reminded why the map stops at human space. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned again by each new generation. Admiral Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's fist, and watched the stars slip past as his fleet traveled through the space between spaces. He was a proud member of the Krin warrior caste, his exoskeleton decorated with marks of honor from a dozen successful campaigns. Behind him, his crew worked efficiently at their stations, monitoring the 46 other warships that made up this expedition force. The Krin Dominion had risen quickly. In just 20 cycles since achieving faster-than-light travel, they had claimed over 100 star systems. Other species had resisted at first, but Krin military superiority always won in the end. Their ships were fast. Their weapons were powerful. Their soldiers were fearless. It was only natural that they would continue to expand, which was why Korath found the galactic community's attitude toward human space so frustrating. Admiral, his second-in-command, approached. We are approaching the coordinates, the border of restricted space. Korath clicked his mandibles together in what his species used for a smile. Display the map. The main screen showed their current position. Ahead, marked in red on every official chart, was the boundary that supposedly no one should cross. Human space, a vast region of systems that the Galactic Council had declared off-limits for over 300 cycles. It makes no sense, Korath said. Not for the first time. These systems are rich in resources. The worlds are suitable for colonization. Yet they sit empty, claimed by a species that maintains only minimal contact with the rest of the galaxy. The Council Treaty requires all members to respect human territory. His second noted carefully. The Council is weak, Korath replied. They are merchants and diplomats, not warriors. They create rules to protect themselves because they cannot protect themselves through strength. He gestured at the screen. The Krin Dominion did not join the Council to follow rules made by cowards. We joined to have access to navigation data and trade routes. The rest is just words. His second looked uncertain but said nothing. That was wise. Questioning the Admiral's judgment was not a healthy career choice in the Krin military. Scanners show activity ahead, one of the sensor operators reported. Single vessel, small, appears to be a mining ship. Human? Korath asked, checking the database. Yes, Admiral. Configuration matches human civilian vessels. No weapons detected. Minimal shields, perfect. Korath had chosen this location carefully. It was at the very edge of human space, far from any major human worlds according to the limited data available. A mining operation, probably automated or with a small crew. Taking it would send a message without triggering a major response. All ships prepare for combat operations, Korath ordered. We will demonstrate that the Krin Dominion does not recognize false boundaries drawn by outdated treaties. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Ahead, exactly where the sensors had predicted, sat a human mining vessel. It was ugly by Krin standards, all functional angles and exposed machinery. It showed no signs of military capability whatsoever. Open a channel, Korath commanded. The communication system activated. Korath composed his statement carefully, making sure his translator would convey the proper tone of authority. Human vessel, you are operating in territory that the Krin Dominion now claims. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with destruction. For a long moment there was no response. Then the human ship replied. The voice that came through the translator was calm, almost casual. Krin vessel, you are in violation of multiple galactic treaties. You have entered restricted space without authorization. Turn your ships around and return to Council territory. This is your only warning. Korath felt anger surge through him. This mining ship, this insignificant civilian vessel was giving him warnings. You misunderstand your situation, human. You are one ship facing 47 warships. You have no weapons and no reinforcements. Surrender or be destroyed. Another pause. Then the human voice came back, and now there was something different in the tone. Something that even the translator could not quite capture. You are warned. What happens next is on you. Fire, Korath ordered. 3 of his escorts opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts crossed the distance in seconds. The human ship's minimal shields flared and collapsed. The hull breached. Atmosphere vented into space. Secondary explosions rippled through the vessel as critical systems failed. But as the mining ship died, something activated. A signal burst out in all directions, powerful enough to light up every sensor in the Krin fleet. What was that? Korath demanded. Some kind of distress beacon, his sensor operator reported. Very powerful. Wideband transmission on frequencies we do not normally monitor. It does not matter, Korath decided. By the time any response arrives, we will have secured this region. Proceed to the nearest inhabited world. We will establish our claim properly. The fleet moved deeper into human space. The first world they reached was a small colony, maybe 10,000 inhabitants according to their scans. It had no orbital defenses, no military vessels, just civilian ships and basic infrastructure. The occupation took less than an hour. Krin soldiers landed in overwhelming force. The human colonists offered no resistance. They simply watched with strange expressions as Krin troops secured key facilities and raised the Dominion flag over the main settlement. Too easy, Korath's second remarked. Because they understand reality, Korath replied. They know they cannot fight. They will accept our rule or be removed. Simple. They took 2 more colonies in the same way over the next 3 days. Each time, the humans offered no resistance. No weapons fire, no orbital defenses, just quiet compliance. It was almost disappointing. But on the 4th day, things began to change. Admiral, we have lost contact with the scout ship Talon's Edge, the communications officer reported. Korath looked up from the planetary occupation report he was reviewing. Lost contact? Explain. They were performing a routine patrol of the outer system, standard check-in procedures. Then nothing. All signals ceased. Send another ship to investigate. 2 hours later, that ship also went silent. This is not equipment failure, Korath's second said quietly. 2 ships do not just disappear. Pirates? Korath suggested, though he knew how unlikely that was. In human space? No pirate would be foolish enough. The communications officer suddenly looked up, his face showing confusion. Admiral, I am receiving strange readings from the computer network. Multiple intrusion attempts, but they are not coming from outside the ship. What do you mean, not from outside? They are already inside our systems, Admiral. They have been for... I do not know how long. I am finding code that should not be there. Programs running that I did not authorize. It is as if someone has been watching everything we do. Korath felt the first touch of something he rarely experienced. Not fear, not yet, but uncertainty. Shut down all non-essential systems. Isolate the computer cores. Find the source of these intrusions. I am trying, Admiral, but the code is very sophisticated, far more advanced than anything I have encountered. It is actively resisting my attempts to remove it. More reports came in. Ships across the fleet were detecting the same intrusions. Computer systems were behaving strangely. Sensors were reporting ghost signals that disappeared when investigated. Communications were experiencing interference that the technical crew could not explain. Then the attacks began. Not attacks with weapons, not attacks with ships, just small things at first. A navigation system that suddenly showed incorrect coordinates. A weapons control system that locked up at a critical moment. A life support monitor that reported false readings and caused unnecessary alarms. This is sabotage, Korath II said. Someone is inside our systems. The humans, Korath realized. But how? Our ships use quantum encrypted networks. Our systems are isolated from external interference. There is no way they could have infiltrated our entire fleet. But even as he said it, he knew it was happening. The evidence was everywhere. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Krin Dominion, was being taken apart from the inside by an enemy he could not see or fight. Pull back, he ordered. All ships, return to the occupied colonies. We will regroup and purge our systems. The fleet withdrew, but the problems only got worse. Ships reported their weapons were offline. Others found their engines would not respond properly. Navigation systems showed different data to different ships, making coordination nearly impossible. And then they started seeing the ships. Not human ships, not at first. Just sensor contacts. Dozens of them appearing at the edge of detection range and then vanishing. Every time the Krin ships moved to investigate, the contacts disappeared. Every time they tried to scan them properly, the sensors showed nothing. They are playing with us, Korath II said, his voice tight with tension. They want us to know they are out there. How many? Korath demanded. Impossible to say, Admiral. Our sensors are compromised, but if the contacts are real, hundreds, maybe thousands. That was impossible. The intelligence report said humans maintained only a small fleet. They were supposed to be isolationist, peaceful. They should not have hundreds of warships. Unless the intelligence reports were wrong. Unless everything the galactic community thought it knew about humans was carefully controlled information. Korath tried to contact the occupied colonies, intending to use the human populations as leverage. But when the communications finally connected, what he saw made his blood run cold. The Krin soldiers on the colony worlds were gone. All of them. The occupation forces, hundreds of troops across 3 worlds, had simply vanished. The human colonists stood in the settlements unharmed and unbothered. When questioned, they simply said the Krin soldiers had been collected during the night. Collected? Korath repeated. By what? By who? No answer came. His fleet was dying, not from battle, but from invisible attacks that struck without warning. A ship would be fine one moment, then all its systems would shut down simultaneously. The crew would evacuate in escape pods, and another Krin vessel would move to recover them. Only to find the disabled ship was somehow working again, just empty of all personnel and computers wiped clean. Admiral, we must withdraw, his second urged. We have lost over half our fleet to these attacks. We have no idea where the enemy is or how they are doing this. This is not a battle we can win, Korath wanted to argue. Every instinct of his warrior training told him to stand and fight. But how could you fight an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere? An enemy that could turn your own ships against you? Send a message to Dominion Command, he finally ordered. Tell them we encountered unexpected resistance. Request reinforcements. Admiral, I cannot guarantee any message will reach them. Our communications are compromised. Try anyway. That was when the human ships revealed themselves. Not gradually, not slowly. One moment the sensors showed empty space. The next moment they showed hundreds of contacts. Ships of various sizes all around the Krin fleet in perfect formation. They had been there the whole time. Hiding in plain sight using technology the Krin could not detect. A transmission came through, cutting through all the interference and sabotage like it was not even there. The same voice from the mining ship, calm and unbothered. Krin fleet, you were given a warning. You ignored it. Now you will leave human space or you will not leave at all. Choose quickly. Korath looked at his sensor displays, at his damaged fleet, at the overwhelming force surrounding him. He thought about his soldiers, vanished from the colonies without a trace. He thought about his ships, compromised and controlled by technology he did not understand. Prepare to withdraw, he ordered quietly. Admiral, the Dominion will see this as cowardice, his second warned. The Dominion will see whatever they want to see, Korath replied. But I will not lead my entire fleet to destruction for pride. Withdraw now. The Krin ships turned and fled. Behind them, the human vessels did not pursue. They simply watched, letting the Krin run back to council space with their tails between their legs. As they crossed the border, Korath's communications finally cleared. He sent his report to Dominion Command, detailing everything that had happened. He expected to be court-martialed for failure. He expected his career to be over. Instead, the response that came back shook him to his core. Fleet Command confirms your report. However, they do not believe it represents the full human capability. You are ordered to return to base immediately. The Dominion Council has decided that human space represents an unacceptable threat to our expansion. A full military response is being prepared. Korath stared at the message in horror. The Dominion was going to war with humanity. His superiors thought his fleet had simply been unlucky or incompetent. They did not understand what he had faced out there in the dark between the stars. They were going to learn. The entire Krin Dominion was going to learn why the map stops at human space. And Korath knew with terrible certainty that the lesson would cost them everything. Vexith had served as a council observer for 30 cycles, and in all that time, he had never seen the council chamber this tense. Representatives from 200 species filled the tiered seats, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. But today they were all focused on the same thing. The humans were here. Vexith's species, the Valorian Accord, prided themselves on neutrality. They took no sides in conflicts. They simply observed, recorded, and occasionally mediated when asked. It was this reputation that had earned Vexith his position as one of the Council's official observers. He had witnessed trade disputes, territorial arguments, and even minor military conflicts. But this was different. This was about the treaty, the oldest and most important treaty in current galactic law. The Krin Dominion's delegation sat in their designated area, their exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber lights. They had requested this emergency session after Admiral Korath's fleet had been forced out of human space. They wanted the Council to condemn human aggression. They wanted support for their claim to the disputed systems, and the humans, who rarely attended Council sessions at all, had actually sent a representative. She stood alone at the speaker's platform. Humans were strange-looking creatures by most galactic standards, bipedal, soft-skinned, with only 2 eyes set in a relatively flat face. This particular human was female, wearing a simple dark suit that marked her as part of Earth's diplomatic corps. Her badge identified her as Ambassador Sarah Chen. Vexith had researched humans after learning they would attend. There was surprisingly little information available. 300 cycles of council membership, and they remained one of the most mysterious species in the community. They shared basic technological data as required by treaty. They maintained diplomatic channels. They paid their council dues, but they never asked for anything, never participated in debates, never seemed interested in galactic affairs at all, until now. The council speaker, a venerable member of the Quellan species, called the session to order. The council recognizes the delegation from the Krin Dominion. The Krin representative stood. Vexith recognized him as High Command Advisor Threxcal, a senior member of their military leadership. His mandibles clicked as he spoke, his translator rendering his words into standard galactic language. Honored council members, the Krin Dominion brings charges of unprovoked aggression against the human species. 10 days ago, a peaceful survey expedition under Admiral Korath's command entered the region known as human space. This expedition was operating within the rights granted to all council members under the Free Navigation Act. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Vexith noted that no one interrupted to correct Threxcal's interpretation of the law, though it was clearly wrong. The Free Navigation Act had specific exemptions for treaty-protected regions. While conducting these peaceful surveys, Threxcal continued, our fleet was attacked by human military forces using advanced stealth technology and cyber warfare. Multiple Krin vessels were disabled. Over 300 military personnel were abducted from their posts. This aggression cannot stand. The Krin Dominion demands that the Council condemn these actions and require human withdrawal from their current territorial claims. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Vexith made careful notes. Threxcal had presented the situation as if the Krin had been innocent victims. He had made no mention of why they entered human space in the first place, or what their actual intentions had been. The Council speaker looked toward the human ambassador. The Council recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth. Sarah Chen stepped forward. She carried no datapad, no prepared remarks. She simply looked calmly at the assembled representatives. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. The Krin Dominion violated the Treaty of First Contact. They entered restricted space after receiving clear warnings. They destroyed a civilian mining vessel, killing all 17 crew members aboard. They occupied 3 human colonies holding over 30,000 civilians under military rule. They ignored every diplomatic communication we sent. They were given multiple opportunities to withdraw peacefully. She paused, and in that pause, Vexith felt the temperature of the room change somehow. Despite this, Chen continued, no Krin personnel were harmed. All abducted colonists were returned safely. All Krin soldiers removed from the occupied worlds were returned to their fleet. All disabled Krin vessels were left intact and functional. We could have destroyed Admiral Korath's fleet completely. We chose not to. We responded with the minimum force necessary to remove an illegal military occupation from our territory. Threxcal's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. The human admits to acts of war. The Council must respond. The Council must respond to a treaty violation, Chen replied calmly. Every member species agreed to respect human territorial sovereignty. The Krin Dominion broke that agreement. We defended our people and our space, as is our right under both galactic law and the original treaty. The Council speaker raised a hand for silence. The treaty in question is indeed binding. However, the Krin Dominion has raised concerns about the proportionality of the human response. Ambassador Chen, can you explain how your forces were able to neutralize an entire Krin fleet without destroying it? No, Chen said simply. The chamber fell silent. I will not provide technical details of human defensive capabilities, Chen explained. That information is not covered under our data sharing agreements. What I can say is this. We have always taken the treaty seriously. We have maintained our isolation as promised. We have respected Council authority in all matters outside our borders. But we will not allow our territory to be violated, and we will not allow our citizens to be harmed. Threxcal stood again, his voice rising. This is unacceptable. The Krin Dominion is a major military power. We demand to know what technology the humans used. We demand inspection rights. We demand compensation for our damaged vessels and humiliated personnel. Chen turned to face the Krin delegation directly. You demand? After you invaded our space, killed our people, and occupied our worlds, you make demands? For the first time, Vexith heard emotion in the human's voice. Not anger exactly. Something colder than that. The Krin Dominion was given one chance, Chen said. That chance was the warning broadcast from our mining vessel. That warning was ignored. What happened after that was a measured response designed to remove a threat while minimizing casualties. If the Dominion had continued to push deeper into our space, the response would have escalated proportionally. Is that a threat? Threxcal demanded. It is a fact. Chen looked back at the Council speaker. The human government asked me to deliver a message to this Council. We do not want conflict. We do not want territory. We do not want to be involved in galactic politics. We want what we have always wanted, to be left alone. The treaty exists to ensure that peace. When that treaty is violated, we will respond. We will always respond. The Council speaker seemed uncomfortable. Ambassador Chen, surely you understand that some members may see your military capabilities as a threat to galactic security. Perhaps it is time for humanity to be more transparent about its defensive systems. Chen shook her head. With respect, Council Speaker, no. Human technology remains our own business. We share what we promised to share under the treaty, nothing more. If other species feel threatened by our capabilities, perhaps they should remember why those capabilities exist. She gestured to a display screen, which activated to show historical footage. Vexith recognized it immediately. The destruction of the Thalaxian fleet 300 cycles ago. We did not ask to be contacted, Chen said. We did not seek out the galaxy. The Thalaxians came to us and demanded our surrender. We defended ourselves. Since then, we have asked only for peace and isolation. Every species that has respected that request has had no problems with humanity. It is only those who choose to violate our borders who face consequences. Threxcal was visibly agitated now. The Krin Dominion will not accept this humiliation. We will not bow to threats from a species that hides behind ancient treaties and refuses to engage with the galactic community. Then you have learned nothing, Chen said quietly. And that is unfortunate for everyone. The council speaker called for a recess. As the various delegations dispersed to discuss the situation privately, Vexith found himself near Ambassador Chen. His curiosity overcame his usual professional detachment. "Ambassador," he said, "may I ask you a question?" Chen turned to him. Up close, Vexith could see that humans had remarkably expressive faces. Chen showed weariness more than anything else. "Of course, Observer Vexith. I know your reputation for impartiality. Why did you come in person? You could have sent a recorded statement. Humans rarely attend council sessions." Chen smiled slightly. "Because I wanted them to see my face when I delivered the rest of our message. The part I did not say in the chamber, which is that we are tired of being tested. Every few generations, some new species achieves faster than light travel and decides that our borders are just suggestions. They test us, we respond, and the lesson fades from memory. Then it happens again." Her expression hardened. "If the Krin Dominion escalates this situation, we will not be as gentle as we were with Admiral Korath's fleet." "How not gentle?" Vexith asked. "You saw what happened to the Thalaxian Empire after their fleet was destroyed. They collapsed from within. Their subject species rebelled. Their economy failed. They went from a major power to fragmented states in less than a decade." Chen's eyes were steady. "That was not our doing. That was simply what happens when an empire built on military strength loses that strength. The Krin Dominion should consider whether they want to risk the same fate." Vexith felt a chill run through his body. "You would destroy their entire empire?" "We would defend our territory," Chen corrected. "What happens to the Krin Dominion after that is up to them. But I want to be very clear, Observer. I want you to record this in your official notes. Humanity has been patient for 300 cycles. We have absorbed insults, ignored provocations, and responded to violations with minimal force. That patience is not infinite." She looked toward where the Krin delegation was conferring with their government. "If they push this further, they will discover why humans developed the technology we have. They will learn what happens when a species that nearly destroyed itself in endless wars decides to apply that experience to an external threat. And I promise you, Observer Vexith, that is a lesson no one wants taught." Before Vexith could respond, Chen's communication device activated. She listened for a moment and her expression changed. Something in her eyes made Vexith's survival instincts suddenly scream warnings. "I need to return to my delegation," Chen said. "Excuse me." She left quickly. Vexith stood there for a moment, then activated his own communication system to contact his superiors. "This is Observer Vexith. Priority message. Situation developing with human Krin situation. Request guidance on emergency protocols." The response came quickly. Guidance acknowledged. "What is your assessment?" Vexith watched Ambassador Chen conferring with her staff, watched the Krin delegation arguing among themselves, watched the other council members nervously discussing what they had witnessed. Assessment: this situation will escalate. The Krin Dominion will not back down based on their military culture. Humanity has drawn a line. When these two positions collide, the result will be significant. Significance level? Vexith thought about the Thalaxian Empire, which no longer existed. He thought about human technology that could disable an entire fleet without destroying it. He thought about a species that had survived its own apocalypse and learned lessons that most of the galaxy had never needed to learn. Potential galaxy-changing event, he reported. Recommend all Valorian personnel in Krin space begin evacuation procedures. Also recommend we quietly move our trade vessels away from human borders. If this escalates, I do not want our ships anywhere near the conflict zone. Acknowledged. Will you remain as observer? Yes. Someone needs to document what happens next. Even as he said it, Vexith was not sure he wanted to see what happened next. But that was his duty. To observe, to record, to bear witness to history as it unfolded. And history, he suspected, was about to teach the Krin Dominion the same lesson the Thalaxians had learned 300 cycles ago. The galaxy was about to be reminded why every map showed human space in red, why the treaty existed, why some borders should never be crossed. The council session resumed, but everything had changed. News had spread through informal channels. The Krin Dominion had not just sent Admiral Korath's fleet into human space. That had been a test, a probe. Now emboldened by what they saw as human weakness in not destroying the fleet entirely, the Krin High Command had made a decision. They were sending their entire military might against human space. Over 3,000 warships, the largest fleet assembled in galactic history since the Thalaxian Empire's fall. Ambassador Chen received the news and simply nodded. Then she sent a single message back to Earth. Vexith, watching through his observer's access to communication logs, saw the message. It was just 2 words. Remove restraints. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had been holding back for 300 cycles, and Vexith would be there to witness it all. Korath sat in the detention facility and waited. The room was comfortable enough, with accommodations adjusted for his species' needs. The temperature was correct. The atmospheric mixture was appropriate. There was food and water, but he was still a prisoner, and that reality burned in his mind like acid. 2 days had passed since his fleet had been captured, not destroyed, not scattered. Captured. Every single ship taken intact by an enemy he had barely seen. The door opened. A human walked in, wearing a simple military uniform, male, middle-aged by human standards if Korath's quick research was correct. The rank insignia translated as commander, though Korath suspected that human military ranks did not perfectly align with Krin equivalents. Admiral Korath, the human said, sitting down across from him. I am Commander Hayes. I wanted to speak with you before your repatriation. Repatriation? Korath's translator carried his surprise. You are releasing me? Of course. You are a prisoner of war, protected under standard conventions. We have no interest in holding you or your crew. Hayes pulled out a data tablet. But before you go, I wanted to make sure you understood what happened, so you can explain it to your superiors. Korath felt anger stir. You want to gloat about your victory? No. Hayes's expression was serious. I want to prevent the next war, because if your government does not understand what happened here, they will try again, and next time people will die. A lot of people. He activated the tablet and holographic displays filled the air between them. Korath saw his own fleet, displayed from a perspective he had never had during the engagement. Every ship was visible, every movement tracked with perfect clarity. Your fleet entered human space here, Hayes explained, pointing to the display. You destroyed our mining vessel, which gave us legal cause to act in self-defense under both galactic law and our own protocols. But we did not respond immediately. You were unprepared, Korath said, trying to salvage some pride from the situation. No, we were watching. Hayes zoomed in on the timeline. From the moment you crossed our border, we knew you were there. We tracked every ship. We listened to every communication. We mapped your network architecture, identified your command structure, and analyzed your tactical doctrine. Korath stared at the display. The data Hayes was showing him included internal Krin communications. Private channels. Encrypted orders. How? Because your technology is based on standard galactic principles, Hayes said. Everyone in the galaxy uses similar systems. Similar encryption. Similar network protocols. It makes trade and communication easier. It creates compatibility. He paused. It also creates vulnerability. The display shifted, showing Korath's flagship. Hayes highlighted certain areas. These are your computer cores. Standard quantum encrypted systems, very secure against conventional attacks. But human AI development took a different path from galactic norms. Our artificial intelligence operates on different principles. When we introduced specialized infiltration code into your systems, your security measures did not recognize it as a threat because it did not match known attack patterns. When? Korath demanded. When did you infiltrate our systems? Before you entered human space. Hayes pulled up communication logs. Your fleet was using standard faster-than-light communications. Every time you sent a message, you created a quantum tunnel through subspace. We have sensors that detect those tunnels. We traced them back to your ships and used them as access points. By the time you destroyed our mining vessel, we had already compromised your entire fleet. Korath felt sick. His supposedly invincible fleet had been naked and vulnerable from the start. We could have destroyed every ship immediately, Hayes continued. We could have caused your reactors to overload, your weapons to detonate, your life support to fail. Instead, we disabled you. We took control of your navigation, Your communications, your weapons. We made it impossible for you to hurt anyone, including yourselves. Why? The question came out before Korath could stop it. Why not just destroy us? Hayes looked at him for a long moment. Because we remember what it is like to destroy our enemies completely. We remember what it is like to have the power to end civilizations and to use that power. We remember the aftermath. He gestured to the displays. This is not a game to us, Admiral. This is not about glory or honor or proving superiority. This is about survival. Yours and ours. He pulled up new data. The Krin Dominion currently fields approximately 3,200 warships. Your government has declared them all operational and ready for deployment. You have a warrior culture that values strength and conquest. You have expanded rapidly through military force. You see human space as an obstacle to your manifest destiny. Korath could not deny any of it. But here is what you do not know, Hayes said quietly. Human defensive capabilities are not limited to cyber warfare. We developed many technologies during our isolation, technologies we keep hidden because we prefer not to use them. The display changed again. Now it showed images from Earth's surface, cities, landscapes, billions of humans going about their lives. We nearly destroyed ourselves, Hayes said, multiple times. We developed weapons that could render our world uninhabitable. We fought wars that killed hundreds of millions. We created artificial plagues, nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment systems, and things I cannot tell you about because they remain classified even now. He looked directly at Korath. We survived because we learned to stop. We unified our world under a single government that made one promise: never again. We would never again let our technology be used to destroy ourselves. We would never again wage total war. Then you are weak, Korath said. You have power but refuse to use it. That is the definition of weakness, is it? Hayes pulled up more data. Let me show you what happens if your government attacks human space with their full fleet. The holographic display showed a simulation. The Krin fleet, all 3,000 ships advancing into human territory, and then the simulation showed the human response. Korath watched in growing horror as the simulation played out. Human ships appeared from nowhere, thousands of them using stealth technology far beyond what Korath had encountered. They did not engage directly. Instead, they deployed weapons that Korath had never seen before. Missiles that phased through shields, beam weapons that ignored conventional defenses, boarding pods that attached to Krin ships and delivered combat, drones that disabled crews. Without killing them, the entire Krin fleet was neutralized in less than 1 hour. This is a simulation based on conservative estimates, Hayes explained. In reality, it would probably take less time. We have mapped every Krin military installation, every shipyard, every command center. We know your fleet composition, your tactical doctrines, your logistical capabilities. We have been watching your species since you achieved faster-than-light travel 20 cycles ago. Korath's mind reeled. You have been spying on us for 20 cycles? We spy on everyone, Hayes said matter-of-factly. Every species that achieves FTL capability is monitored until we determine their threat level. Most species get classified as low risk and we leave them alone. Some, like the Krin Dominion, get classified as potential threats and receive closer attention. He deactivated the simulation. But here is the important part, Admiral. This simulation shows a scenario where we disable your fleet without destroying it, just like we did with your expedition. No Krin deaths, no ships destroyed. Just complete military neutralization. We return your people, leave your ships intact, and give you one more warning. And if we ignore that warning, Hayes' expression became grim. Then we stop being gentle. Then we use the technologies we developed during our darkest times, the weapons we swore never to use again unless we had no choice. He paused. The Thalaxian Empire had a fleet of almost 5,000 ships when they attacked Earth. Within 1 month, their empire collapsed. Not because we invaded them, but because we demonstrated that their military could not protect them. Subject species rebelled. Economic systems failed. Political factions turned on each other. The empire tore itself apart. You want us to fear you, Korath said. We want you to understand reality, Hayes corrected. The Krin Dominion can continue to expand in whatever direction you choose. You can conquer peaceful species and build your empire. We will not interfere. But if you come into human space again, if you threaten human lives again, we will respond. And each time you push, our response will escalate. He leaned forward. Your government thinks we are weak because we did not destroy your fleet. They think restraint equals inability. That is a dangerous mistake. We showed restraint because we value life, even the lives of those who attack us. But that restraint has limits. Korath absorbed this. His warrior training told him to reject these words, to dismiss them as manipulation and propaganda. But he had seen what human technology could do. He had watched his fleet become helpless, watched his soldiers vanish from their posts, watched his ships become toys in the hands of an enemy he could not see or fight. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we return you to your government. We return your entire crew, all 8,347 Krin military personnel who participated in the incursion. We return your ships fully functional, with only our infiltration code removed. We even repair the damage from your brief engagement with our mining vessel." Hayes stood. "You go home, Admiral. You deliver this message to your high command. The treaty exists for a reason. The red zone on the maps is not a suggestion. Human space is restricted because we choose to restrict it, and we have the capability to enforce that choice. Test us again and the response will be more severe." 2 guards entered the room. Not Krin, but other aliens, members of neutral species who had been hired to facilitate the prisoner transfer. They were here to verify that Korath had been treated according to galactic conventions. As Korath was led out, he turned back to Hayes. "You say you do not want war, but you are showing us exactly how to fight you. You are revealing your capabilities." Hayes smiled slightly. "Am I? Admiral, everything I have shown you is at least 20 years old by human standards. Our current capabilities are classified. What I have revealed is what we are comfortable with potential enemies knowing. It is the minimum deterrent." The implications hit Korath like a physical blow. Everything he had seen, all the overwhelming technology that had defeated his fleet so easily, was obsolete by human standards. They had better weapons, better defenses, better everything, and they were keeping it hidden. "There is one more thing you should know," Hayes said as Korath reached the door. "Earth has a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. We have been speaking very softly for 300 cycles. We have been polite. We have been patient. We have shown restraint at every opportunity. But that big stick we carry, it is bigger than anyone in the galaxy imagines. Please make sure your government understands that before they decide to swing their stick at us." Korath was taken to a transport ship, along with his entire crew. They were indeed unharmed, though many showed signs of psychological stress. The experience of being captured by an invisible enemy, of having their ships turned against them, had shaken these proud warriors to their core. As the transport prepared to depart human space, Korath looked at the sensor displays. He could see human vessels now not hiding anymore, hundreds of them, surrounding the transport as it moved toward the border. They were not threatening. They were escorting. Making sure the Krin left, one of his officers approached. "Admiral, what do we tell the High Command?" Korath thought about Commander Hayes' words. He thought about the simulation showing his entire species' fleet being neutralized in an hour. He thought about the Thalaxian Empire, once mighty, now just a footnote in history. "We tell them the truth," Korath said finally. "We tell them that we were outmatched from the beginning. We tell them that human technology is far beyond our understanding. We tell them that the warnings on the maps are not exaggerations. Will they listen?" Korath looked at his officer, a young warrior who still believed in Krin's superiority. "I do not know. But if they do not, then the Krin Dominion will learn the same lesson the Thalaxians learned, and we will lose everything." The transport crossed the border. Behind them, human space returned to its usual state of apparent quiet. The ships vanished from sensors. The region became empty and silent again, as if nothing had happened. But Korath knew the truth now. It was never empty. Humans were always watching, always monitoring, always ready. They had chosen isolation, but that choice came with a price for anyone who violated it. The map showed human space in red for a reason. It was not a warning about natural hazards. It was a warning about a species that had mastered war so completely that they chose peace instead. A species that asked only to be left alone, and had the power to enforce that request against any threat. Korath hoped his government would listen to his report. He hoped they would understand. Because if they did not, he knew exactly what would happen next, and he did not want to watch his entire civilization collapse the way the Thalaxians had. But deep down, knowing his people's pride and their warrior culture, Korath suspected they would not listen. They would see his defeat as a fluke, a temporary setback. They would gather their full strength and attack again, and then they would learn why the galaxy fears the species that refuses to fight unless given no other choice. They would learn what happens when you force humans to stop being gentle. Korath prayed he was wrong, but he knew he was not. Zilthara stood before the massive holographic display in the Galactic Cartography Institute and stared at the changes she was being ordered to make. 6 months had passed since what the galaxy now called the Krin incident, and nothing would ever be the same. The new borders have been confirmed by all parties, her supervisor said quietly. Update the official maps accordingly. The red zone around human space had tripled in size. Not because humans had claimed more territory. They had not expanded at all. The new borders were a buffer zone, requested by the humans themselves and instantly agreed to by every member of the Galactic Council. No one wanted to be anywhere near human space anymore. Zilthara thought back to 6 months ago, when she had been just another junior cartographer with questions about map markings. Now she was senior enough to be trusted with classified updates, and she wished she was not. Some knowledge was a burden. Has there been any word from the Krin Dominion? She asked. Her supervisor's scales darkened, a sign of discomfort. They have not responded to council communications in 3 months. Long-range observations suggest their government has collapsed. Multiple successor states are fighting for control of what remains. Zilthara's tentacles drooped, an entire civilization fallen apart. How many died? None. Her supervisor's tone carried wonder and horror mixed together. That is the remarkable thing. The humans kept their promise. Not a single Krin died in the conflict. But their empire is gone anyway. Zilthara began updating the maps as she listened to her supervisor explain what had happened. The story had been pieced together from council intelligence reports, observer accounts, and leaked Krin military records. It was the kind of story that would be told in the galaxy for centuries to come. After Admiral Korath returned with his report, the Krin High Command had done exactly what everyone feared. They had dismissed his warnings as cowardice. They had assembled their entire military might and launched a full invasion of human space. 3,200 warships, the largest military force deployed in galactic history. The war lasted 48 hours, not because it was a hard-fought battle, not because both sides suffered terrible losses. It lasted 48 hours because that was how long it took for humans to systematically neutralize every single Krin military asset. The first 12 hours, the Krin fleet advanced confidently into human territory. They detected no defenders. Their sensors showed empty space. Their commanders thought they had caught humanity unprepared. Then the humans revealed themselves, not gradually, not with warnings. They simply appeared, thousands of ships materializing from stealth as if reality itself was glitching. The Krin fleet found itself surrounded by a force 5 times their size. Ships that their sensors insisted were not there even as they appeared on visual displays. What happened next had been captured by Council observer Vexith, who had positioned his observation vessel at the border, specifically to document the conflict. Zilthara had watched his recordings multiple times, and each viewing made her feel smaller and more insignificant. The humans did not attack with weapons. Not at first. They attacked with information warfare on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Every Krin ship, every installation, every military computer system within 500 light-years of the border, all compromised simultaneously. The Krin military watched helplessly as their own systems turned against them. Navigation showed false coordinates. Weapons would not respond to commands. Communications channels broadcast nothing but a simple message in Krin language. Stand down. This is your final warning. Some Krin commanders tried to fight anyway. Their ships fired on human vessels, and this was when the galaxy learned what human weapons could really do. The ships that fired found their own weapon systems immediately disabled. Not damaged, not destroyed, simply turned off as if someone had flipped a switch. Boarding pods launched from human ships attached to Krin hulls and delivered combat drones that swept through the vessels. These drones did not kill. They simply tranquilized every living being aboard and secured them in safe locations. Within 6 hours of the first shot being fired, over half the Krin fleet had been captured intact. The remaining ships tried to retreat, but human vessels appeared in front of them, behind them, around them. There was nowhere to run. By the end of the first day, the entire Krin military fleet was in human custody, not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair. Just taken, like pieces on a game board being swept into the winner's hand. But the humans were not finished. They had promised escalation if the Krin pushed further, and they kept that promise. While the fleet was being neutralized, human special forces appeared on the Krin homeworld. Not in ships, not through orbital insertion. They just appeared, materializing inside secure military facilities using technology that the Galactic Council still could not explain. Some kind of advanced teleportation or dimensional shifting. These forces did not attack civilians. They did not occupy cities. They did not demand surrender. They simply entered every military installation, every weapons production facility, every strategic command center, and disabled them. They dismantled nuclear arsenals. They shut down weapon factories. They erased military databases. The Krin government watched as their entire military apparatus was taken apart in front of them. And still no one died. Human forces used non-lethal methods exclusively: tranquilizer rounds, electromagnetic pulses, stun weapons. The Krin military was left unconscious but unharmed. When they woke up, they found their weapons gone. Their factories retooled for civilian production. Their warships in orbit around their own capital, intact but with all weapons removed and computer systems wiped clean. And a message from Earth: you were warned. Multiple times. You ignored every warning. Now you have no military capability. You cannot threaten us. You cannot threaten anyone. What you do next is your choice, but know this: we will be watching. If you rebuild your military for aggressive purposes, we will know. If you threaten human space again, there will be no third chance. The psychological impact was devastating. The Krin were a warrior culture. Their entire identity was built around military strength and conquest. To have that strength removed so completely, so easily, broke something fundamental in their society. Within weeks, the Krin government collapsed. Regional commanders declared independence. Subject species rebelled. Economic systems failed as military contracts vanished. The empire fractured into dozens of competing states, none of them strong enough to threaten their neighbors, all of them too busy with internal conflicts to think about external expansion. And through it all, not a single death directly caused by human action. The Krin who died did so in their own civil conflicts, fighting each other over the scraps of their former empire. Silthara finished updating the borders and stepped back to look at the completed map. The red zone now encompassed a huge portion of the galaxy. Inside that zone, human worlds continued their quiet existence. Outside it, the rest of the galaxy tried to process what had happened. I need to understand something, Silthara said to her supervisor. Why did humans fight that way? They could have destroyed the Krin fleet easily. Why go to such lengths to avoid killing? Her supervisor was quiet for a moment. I have been researching that question. I have reviewed Earth's history in detail. What I found— He paused. Humans are not peaceful because they are weak. They are peaceful because they know exactly what war costs. They have experienced total war. They have fought conflicts that killed significant percentages of their own population. They have created weapons that could end all life on their world. He pulled up historical images from Earth. Cities destroyed by atomic weapons, continents scarred by industrial warfare, mass graves from conflicts that killed millions. They learned lessons that most species never have to learn. They learned that victory in war often cost more than defeat. They learned that the real horror is not losing, but winning at such a cost that there is nothing left worth having. So they chose to fight without killing, Silthara said. They chose to remove threats while preserving life, even the lives of their enemies. Her supervisor looked at the map. That is why they are so terrifying. Not because of their weapons, though those are formidable, but because they have the discipline to use overwhelming force with perfect restraint. They can destroy civilizations but choose not to. That kind of power, combined with that kind of control, is beyond anything the galaxy has encountered before. Silthara thought about this. She thought about the Krin who had been so proud and confident. She thought about the Thalaxians before them. She thought about all the species throughout history who had made the mistake of testing human patience. I want to do something, she said suddenly. Something that might help prevent this from happening again. What? I want to create a database. A comprehensive record of every species that has violated human borders and what happened to them. I want to interview survivors. I want to document the technology humans used, or at least what witnesses observed. I want to create a resource that any new species can access when they join the Council. Her supervisor considered this. That would be useful. But it would also be controversial. Some species prefer to forget their defeats. Then those species are fools. Zilthara felt a strength in her conviction that surprised her. The whole point of history is to learn from it. If we do not document what happened, then the next aggressive empire will make the same mistakes, and more lives will be disrupted. More civilizations will fall apart even if no one dies directly. Do it, her supervisor decided. I will authorize the project. But be thorough. If we are going to create a warning, let it be a complete one. Over the following months, Zilthara threw herself into the work. She traveled to Krin space, or what remained of it, and interviewed survivors. She spoke with Admiral Korath, who had become a reluctant voice for peace in one of the successor states. She reviewed military records, observer reports, and classified documents. She interviewed species who had had brief encounters with humans over the centuries, smugglers who had strayed into human space and been escorted out with stern warnings, pirates who had tried to raid human shipping and found themselves captured by vessels they never saw coming, diplomats who had negotiated with human representatives and been struck by their patience and restraint. A pattern emerged. Humans always warned first. They always gave chances. They always used the minimum force necessary. But when pushed too far, they responded with such overwhelming capability that resistance became impossible. They are like a sleeping giant, one old Thalaxian told her. He had been a junior officer on one of the ships that survived the destruction of the Thalaxian fleet 300 cycles ago. They want to sleep. They want to be left alone. But if you wake them, if you force them to act, you discover that the giant is stronger than you ever imagined, and by then it is too late. Zilthara compiled everything into a comprehensive database. She included historical records, tactical analyses, psychological profiles, and survivor testimonies. She added it to the official onboarding materials for new council members, with a simple title, The Human Question, Why the Map Stops at Human Space. When the database was complete, she received an unexpected message. It was from Earth, from Ambassador Sarah Chen herself. Cartographer Zilthara, I wanted to thank you for your work on the historical database regarding human-galactic relations. Your documentation is accurate and fair. You have done the galaxy a service by creating this resource. Perhaps it will prevent future conflicts, the message continued. I also wanted to address something you wrote in your conclusion. You asked why humans continue to isolate themselves when we clearly have the power to be a major galactic force. The answer is simple. We learned that power without wisdom leads to ruin. We learned that conquest is easy, but governance is hard. We learned that destroying enemies is simple, but building lasting peace is complex. We isolate ourselves not because we fear the galaxy, but because we fear ourselves. We know what we are capable of in war. We have seen our own darkest impulses. By staying separate, by maintaining our borders, we protect the galaxy from the worst parts of human nature. The restraint we showed to the Krin was not weakness. It was the result of centuries of deliberate cultural evolution, designed to prevent us from becoming monsters. The map stops at human space because that is where galactic understanding of warfare becomes obsolete. But it is also where human understanding of peace begins. We hope that border never needs to move. We hope that the lessons of history will be sufficient. But if they are not, we will respond as we have always responded, with the minimum force necessary, maximum restraint possible, and the earnest hope that next time, the warning will be enough. Zilthara read the message multiple times. Then she added it to the database as the final entry. Years passed. New species joined the Galactic Council and reviewed the database as part of their onboarding process. Some dismissed it as propaganda or exaggeration. Most took it seriously. A few became adamant advocates for respecting human borders. The Krin successor states slowly rebuilt, but none of them pursued military expansion. They had learned their lesson. Some became peaceful trading nations. Others focused on internal development. A few even established friendly relations with human colonies, trading goods and information at the border. Admiral Korath lived long enough to see his people change. He wrote his own memoir about the Krin incident, which became required reading in what remained of the Krin military academies. His final words in that memoir were simple. We thought we were strong. We learned we were merely violent. There is a difference. Zilthara eventually became the director of the Galactic Cartography Institute. She maintained the maps, updated the borders, and ensured that the red zone around human space remained prominent and well documented. She trained new cartographers and told them the stories of why certain regions were marked certain ways. And whenever a new species achieved faster-than-light travel, whenever ambitious empires looked at the maps and wondered about that large red zone, Zilthara made sure they received the full historical database. She made sure they understood. Some listened. Some did not. But the galaxy as a whole learned to respect that border. Trade happened at designated points. Diplomacy occurred through proper channels, and human space remained separate, protected by both treaty and capability. On Earth, life continued as it always had. Humans worked, loved, built, and dreamed. They remained largely unaware of how much fear their civilization inspired in the galaxy. They knew about the border incidents, of course, but these were handled by their military and diplomatic corps. For most humans, the galaxy was a distant concern. They preferred it that way. They had their own world, their own challenges, their own dreams. They had learned the hard way that reaching too far, wanting too much, led to disaster. So they stayed home, developed their technology, improved their society, and left the rest of the galaxy alone. The map still showed human space in red. The warning was still clear. And after the Krin incident, no major power tested that warning again. Smaller violations still occurred occasionally. Pirates, smugglers, the lost explorer who miscalculated their navigation. But these were handled quietly, with warnings and escorts and minimal force. The big stick remained visible but unused. The soft words continued to be sufficient, and the galaxy learned to sleep easier, knowing that the most dangerous species in known space was also the most reluctant to fight. Zilthara often thought about the question that had started her journey. Why was human space marked the way it was? She knew the answer now. It was marked that way to protect everyone. To protect other species from human capabilities, yes, but also to protect humans from their own history. The red zone was not just a warning. It was a promise that humanity had made to itself. One day, near the end of her long career, Zilthara received a visit from a young cartographer who reminded her of herself many years ago. The young one had questions, naturally. Questions about the maps, about the borders, about why certain regions were marked in certain ways. Why do we still mark human space like this? The young cartographer asked. It has been centuries since the last major incident. Perhaps humans have changed. Perhaps they are not as dangerous as the old records suggest. Zilthara looked at her young colleague with 3 eyes that had seen much in a long life. Come with me, she said. She led the young cartographer to the observation deck where they could see the stars stretching out in all directions. She pointed toward a region of space where human territory lay, too far to see with natural eyes but present on all the displays. Let me tell you about a message I received last year, Zilthara said. It was from a human mining vessel, the same type as the one Admiral Korath destroyed all those years ago. They had detected a distress signal from a Krin cargo ship that had suffered a catastrophic systems failure. This was in neutral space not far from the border. What happened? The young cartographer asked. The human ship responded immediately. They crossed into the area, rescued all 17 Krin crew members, repaired the cargo ship's critical systems, and even provided supplies for their journey home. Then they left, refusing any payment or recognition. Zilthara smiled slightly. The Krin captain sent a report to his government and copied the council. He said the human crew treated them with kindness and professionalism. He said they worked for 6 hours to repair systems they had no obligation to fix. He said one of the human engineers told him something interesting. What did they say? The engineer said, "We remember what it is like when ships are in danger and no one comes to help. We remember what it is like when distress calls go unanswered. We will never let that happen to anyone if we can prevent it." Zilthara looked at the young cartographer. Do you understand? Humans remember their history. They remember the wars, the destruction, the times when help did not come, and they have decided to be better than that. But the red zone, the young cartographer started. The red zone remains because humans are still capable of what they did to the Thalaxians and the Krin. The technology has not disappeared. The knowledge has not been forgotten. If threatened, they will respond with the same overwhelming force they have always used. But they would rather rescue a stranded crew than fight a war. They would rather trade than conquer. They would rather be left alone than dominate. Zilthara pulled up a file on her personal terminal. This is a message I keep for moments like this. It was sent to me by Ambassador Chen shortly before she retired. She wanted me to understand something about human philosophy. She displayed the message, It was brief but powerful. Cartographer Zilthara, you asked me once why we maintain such strict borders when we have proven we can enforce them. Here is your answer. Strength is easy. Any species can develop weapons. Any civilization can learn to destroy. What is hard is choosing not to. What is difficult is having power and using it wisely. We isolate ourselves not because we fear others, but because we fear the temptation to use our power unwisely. The border protects you from us, but it also protects us from becoming what we once were. Never forget, the most dangerous human is not the one who wants to conquer. It is the one who remembers why conquest is always a mistake. The young cartographer read the message silently. When they looked up, their expression had changed. Understanding had replaced skepticism. So the map stops at human space because that is where the monsters live, Zilthara said gently. Monsters who chose to be gentle. Monsters who learned to master themselves before trying to master others. Monsters who ask only to be left alone and have proven they have every right to make that request. She gestured to the star-filled display. Every map I create, every border I mark, every warning I document is part of a promise. A promise that future generations will remember why some boundaries exist, that they will learn from history instead of repeating it, that they will choose wisdom over ambition. And if they do not, the young cartographer asked quietly. Zilthara thought about the Krin Dominion, fractured and humbled. She thought about the Thalaxian Empire, which existed now only in history books. She thought about all the species who had tested human patience and learned hard lessons as a result. Then they will learn, she said. Humans will teach them. Not with cruelty, not with genocide, but with the same measured response they have always used. They will defend themselves. They will remove threats. And they will do it in a way that leaves everyone alive to remember why testing human borders is always a mistake. She placed a gentle tentacle on the young cartographer's shoulder. This is the most important lesson you will learn in your career. Some borders exist not because of natural barriers, but because of conscious choice. Human space is restricted because humans chose to restrict it. They could expand, they could conquer, they could dominate the entire galaxy if they wanted. But they do not want to. They learned that lesson long ago, before most of our species had even achieved spaceflight. That is terrifying, the young cartographer whispered. Yes, Zilthara agreed. It is terrifying. And it is also hopeful, because it proves that even the most violent species can change. It proves that power does not have to corrupt. It proves that the strong can choose to be gentle. She returned to her workstation, where the galactic maps still glowed with all their markings and warnings. Remember this conversation. Remember it when you become director of this institute, as I believe you will someday. Remember it when new species join the council and ask why their maps show such large red zones. Remember it when ambitious empires look at human territory and see opportunity instead of warning. I will remember, the young cartographer promised. Years continued to pass. Zilthara eventually retired, her long career complete. The young cartographer did indeed become director, and they maintained the maps just as Zilthara had taught them. The red zone remained, the warning stayed clear, and the galaxy continued to respect the boundary. Deep in human space, on a small mining vessel traveling between asteroid fields, a crew of 17 humans went about their work. They knew about the border incidents that happened occasionally. They knew about the military that protected them, but mostly they thought about their jobs, their families, their daily lives. One of them, a young engineer on her first deep space assignment, looked at the navigation display and saw the border marker indicating the edge of human territory. She asked her captain about it. Why do we stay inside the borders? She asked. There are resources out there, worlds to explore. Why limit ourselves? The captain, an older woman who had served in the military before becoming a civilian miner, smiled. Because we learned a long time ago that more is not always better. We have everything we need here. We have room to grow. We have resources to develop. We do not need to expand into other people's territory. But what if they expand into ours? Then we remind them why expansion is a bad idea. The captain's smile faded slightly. But we would rather not have to do that. Every time we defend ourselves, even when we do it perfectly and nobody dies, it still costs something. It costs peace of mind. It costs the comfortable knowledge that we are not at war. So we maintain the borders. We respect other people's space and we hope they will respect ours. The young engineer nodded and returned to her work. Around them, the vast emptiness of space stretched in all directions. Somewhere far away, on worlds she would never visit, billions of beings from hundreds of species lived their lives. Most of them would never think about humans at all. Some would know the stories. A few would remember the warnings. And that was exactly how humans preferred it. To be left alone, to be safe behind borders maintained by capability but enforced with restraint, to be the species that everyone knew about but nobody truly understood. The map still stopped at human space. It would always stop there unless humanity chose otherwise. And after everything they had experienced, after all the lessons learned through fire and blood and near extinction, they would never choose otherwise. The red zone would remain. The warning would persist, and the galaxy would continue to sleep peacefully, protected by monsters who had learned to be gentle, guarded by warriors who preferred peace, watched over by a species that had mastered the hardest lesson of all. That true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to choose not to. That was why the map stopped at human space. That was why it would always stop there. And as long as the galaxy remembered that lesson, everyone could live in peace. The stars continued their ancient dance. The species continued their daily lives. And humanity continued its quiet watch, hoping that the warnings would be sufficient, prepared for the day they might not be, but always choosing restraint over aggression, peace over war, isolation over dominion. That was the human way. That was the promise they had made to themselves and to the galaxy. And 300 cycles of history had proven they would keep that promise no matter the cost. The map showed human space in red. And that was exactly how it should be.